Suzette, would you like to introduce yourself and tell everyone what we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, it's so nice to be here with everybody. I'm Suzette Benford, and I've worked at the Cognitive Empowerment Program for a couple of years now. And I work with the participants of the program, both the members, the folks with a diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment, and also their care partners. And before I got to Emory, I worked at the Alzheimer's Association for 12 years. So my specialty there was early stage dementia. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and share my screen. And I have a presentation for you today. Can you guys see that, Matt? Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. All right. See if I can get rid of this pane here. Hide. Loading meeting controls. Here we go.
Perfect.
All right, great. So this topic that we're going to talk about today, the financial abuse and exploitation of older adults, is not a fun topic to discuss. It's not a pleasant topic, but I think it's really important for us to be aware that financial abuse of elders is really, really common. It's a lot more common than people would think, and it's on the rise. And so today we're going to be talking about what financial abuse and exploitation is. We'll let you know about some of the most common fraud schemes that are out there right now. Warning signs of financial abuse, how you can recognize when it's perhaps happening to somebody that you know, how you can protect yourself, and what to do if you or somebody that you know is a victim of financial abuse or exploitation. Okay, so first of all, let's just define it. Elder abuse is the theft, fraud, or misuse of an older adult's assets or credit, or use of undue influence to gain control of the person's money or property. And just in the last several years, it has become, they've changed the laws a bit, and it's become a felony in Georgia. Any type of elder abuse, and that includes financial abuse, is a felony now in Georgia. And, you know, one of the issues that we're running up against as professionals trying to prevent this abuse is that all the technological advances that we have now really make it a lot harder for older adults to, know what's safe and what's not safe. You have so much information coming at you from different sources, and the technology can really make it a lot more difficult. So again, this is a growing problem. Elder financial abuse is a growing crime. And people over the age of 50 are really targeted by scammers because people over 50 control 70% of the nation's wealth. And fraudsters really work this like a job. They're always developing new and different tactics to take advantage of older adults, retiring baby boomers. 10,000 people in this country turn 65 every day. And the population, the older population, is growing by the day. And so there's a lot of opportunity out there. And these professional fraudsters, they really work hard at understanding how older adults can be exploited, especially people with cognitive impairment. They study the ways to take advantage of people, and they end up knowing as much about the subject of cognitive impairment as other professionals do. They take it that seriously. I went to a conference once where there was an FBI agent there who had specialized in these crimes, and he said it's an industry and one that the people who practice it take really seriously. So it's very scary. And these facts here that I got from the American Bankers Association, their website says that senior financial abuse is estimated to have cost victims 2.9 billion last year alone. So that's an estimate. And we do know that only 1 in 23 cases of elder financial abuse are reported. And so it's probably more significant than that. Next, we'll talk about some common elder fraud schemes. And you may have heard of many of these or most of these, but it's really important to be on the lookout for these. The first one is romance scams. And this is where the fraudsters pose as someone who's really interested in you romantically. And they do it on dating sites and sometimes on social media sites. And this happened actually to a relative of mine. And the person started playing words with friends with her online and sent her some private messages. And pretty soon it was a full-blown scam. And she lost about $6,000, I think, in the long run, sending him money so that he could come and see her. So romance scams are on the rise, and they sometimes take in people, sometimes lonely people who you wouldn't really think would be susceptible to this kind of thing. So that's something to be aware of. And then you've got tech support scams where the fraudsters pose as tech support people, and they say, you know, we've gotten a message that something is wrong with your computer and we're going to fix it for you. And so, you know, we're going to work with you to get that done. And then all of a sudden they've got access to your computer.
This is it. Just really quickly, one person in chat just reported that they can't hear you very well. I can hear you pretty clearly, but I'm not sure if it's the connection. So I just wanted to ask if anyone else is having trouble hearing, please post something in chat and we'll try and take a look at it right now. Sorry for interrupting.
No, that's fine. I'll try to speak up a little bit too. The next scam that we should be aware of is the grandparent scam. And you may have heard about this. The criminals call someone and pretend to be, usually it's a child or a grandchild. And sometimes, you know, they'll be crying and it's kind of hard to identify a voice. And they say they need to be bailed out of jail or they have some other kind of immediate financial need. And believe it or not, this actually works sometimes. So that's something to look out for. Then we've got government impersonation scams. And so the fraudsters, for example, might pose as an IRS agent and say that the person owes a lot of, back taxes and they're going to arrest or prosecute them unless they agree to pay. And then they'll provide a way for them to send the money. And a lot of people fall for that as well. Then there's the scam that's been popular for quite a number of years, I think, which is the sweepstakes or lottery scam. So the criminals say that they either work for a charitable organization first to say, oh, you can trust me and I work for this nonprofit, say, and then they ask for large sums of money. Or this is the most popular form. They tell you that you've won a foreign lottery or a sweepstakes. And often it will be someone who is from another country. And they claim that you can get these funds that you won if you give them a fee, sometimes a fairly hefty fee that you can wire to them usually. And so unfortunately, I also know somebody who fell victim to this scam. So it's really common. And then this one also is one that's been around for a really long time. That's the home repair scam. So the people come to your door and they say, I'll fix this or that. They do your roof. They'll offer to provide some home improvement service for you. And they might actually look like they're going to start the work. The homeowner gives them the money and then they never do any of the work or they never complete the work. And a lot of times these folks just disappear and it's really hard to track them down. Then we have family and caregiver scams. So this is when the perpetrators, the people who are doing the financial abuse, are relatives or acquaintances of the victim, and they find ways to get their money or their property. And sometimes this is a caregiver who comes into the home, and perhaps the family doesn't really know exactly what's happening while this caregiver is there with the older adult, and they don't find out until later that they've been, asking the person for money, or maybe giving them a story about how they, their children are sick or whatever. But unfortunately, in a pretty big majority of financial abuse cases, the person who's being financially abused or exploited knows the perpetrator. And then finally, we've got investment scams. So this is where the criminals offer really shady investments or products, which turn out to be either completely not real, or such a bad investment that the person's that loses lots and lots of money. I knew somebody who lost about $40,000 this way. So these are some of the examples. There are others, but these are some of the most prevalent ones that I wanted you to be aware of. Also, back in January, the Georgia Attorney General issued this warning because they were getting really concerned about financial exploitation of seniors and disabled adults during the pandemic. And there are a couple of reasons for this. With the stimulus checks coming out, other people know that the checks are coming out, so they're looking for ways to get those stimulus checks. The other thing is, you had a lot of people out of work and really desperate to exploit other people in any way that they can. And then finally, because there's a lot of social isolation involved with the pandemic, other people are not around to witness the warning signs. So this kind of thing that might have been noticed in sort of a more normal time might go unnoticed because people are so socially isolated. So, and I think this is, this was a big concern for everybody, especially when the stimulus checks came out. Okay, so next, let's move on to some warning signs. And so these are things that you might be on the lookout for that might give you a clue. There's red flags that might indicate that somebody is being abused or exploited. So you're looking for changes in the person's financial or behavioral patterns even. So some of these are obvious: unusual activity in the bank accounts, including large, frequent, or unexplained withdrawals or transfers between accounts. And of course, insufficient funds, bank overdrafts, or bills going unpaid. If you notice people closing out accounts or cashing in retirement funds, CDs with no regard to penalties, sometimes that's a red flag. Often when you ask people in this situation questions, they might be reluctant to talk about it. Sometimes there's the people have threatened them, and sometimes it's just embarrassment. Sometimes they sort of understand what's going on, and there's just maybe a lot of shame and regret and embarrassment that they've been taken advantage of. If you see checks that are written, with the explanation on them as loans or gifts, and that continues to go on, and the sums sometimes get larger, that can be a warning sign. If you notice that bank statements are not going to the person's home anymore, they've been diverted to another place, that can be a warning sign. Then if the person has signed new powers of attorney and don't necessarily understand, the parameters of those powers of attorney, or if it's somebody that they don't know very well that they've signed the power of attorney over to. That's a warning sign. Then if you notice a caregiver, relative, or friend, they suddenly get involved in the person's financial transactions when they hadn't ever before, and they start assuming more and more control of those transactions. And also, of course, if the person starts to make sudden or unexpected changes to wills and trusts, of course, is a red flag. So next, let's talk about some things that we can all do to protect ourselves from this kind of abuse and exploitation. So first of all, it's really important to have a financial plan, especially if your estate is relatively large or complicated, or if you own a lot of property. You need to have all your documents in order. Your, for those who have fairly large or complicated estates, it might be a good idea to have a financial planner or an elder law attorney look at your planning, make sure that you have all of your wills and your legal documents in order. Sometimes if you develop a relationship with someone at your bank, they're also a really good resource for you. And they can also help look for unusual activity in your bank accounts if you suspect that something might be happening. So another good tip is to shred receipts, bank statements, and unused credit card offers before throwing them away, because fraudsters have been known many times to go through people's garbage to get this kind of information. And then, for example, for a credit card offer, they can just fill it out any way they want to and use that in your name. Carefully choose a trustworthy person to act as your agent in all estate planning matters. I think it's important to go ahead and identify somebody now, even if you're not at the point where you think you need someone. It's good to have a plan in place. Think about who is a trustworthy person who would act on your behalf in your best interests to be your agent, your representative. Then if you know that people are going to be in your home that you don't know, for example, if you're having work done in your home, it's a good idea to lock up your checkbook and your account statements and passwords and other information that people might be kind of on the lookout for. Then order copies of your credit report once a year to ensure accuracy. Sometimes people have, it's not until they check their credit report that they discovered that there's been identity theft or some kind of fraud going on in their accounts. And then this last one is pretty obvious. Be very cautious of unsolicited phone calls, mailings, or door-to-door service offers. This is a good one. Never pay a fee or taxes to collect sweepstakes or lottery winnings. We talked about that when we talked about the sweepstakes scam before, the lottery scam. You shouldn't ever have to pay a fee if you win something to collect it. Never rush into a big financial decision. These professional fraudsters, what they often do is they create a situation or a scenario where you feel like you've got to act right now, or you're going to miss out on something, or something bad is going to happen. So they create a sense of urgency, and that puts pressure on you to make a decision. So never feel pressured to make a decision like that. If it doesn't seem right to you, if it seems like there's a possibility that the person might not be on the up and up, just tell them that you need to think about it, hang up, and talk to somebody else about it. Consult with a financial advisor or attorney before signing any document that you don't fully understand. Any document, and the legalese that these kind of documents are written in sometimes are really hard to decipher. So it's a good idea to have somebody else look at that before you sign. We mentioned this before. Get to know your banker and build a relationship with the people who handle your finances. You can go into the bank and ask to sit down with somebody at a desk, somebody who is either an officer of the bank or someone who works there. And if you do develop a good relationship with these folks, they can really they can really be of service to you, not just looking out for any suspicious activity on your account, but if other people come in trying to say that they have your permission to make financial transactions for them, maybe they have a forged power of attorney. If you have reason to believe that something like that would ever happen, they can flag your account and help be on the lookout for that. And then before you hire anybody to do really any kind of work, but especially work on your house, check references and credentials before you actually hire anyone, because again, that is a really super popular scam. Okay. Instead of paying with cash, when you can pay with checks or credit cards, that's good because it leaves a paper trail. And just remember that if somebody is threatening you or being really intimidating, it is your perfect right to report them either to APS, someone at the bank, or the police. If somebody, even somebody that you know, it's okay. Usually if they'll do it to one person, they'll do it to another person. And sometimes people find that really difficult to do, to report somebody that they know, but sometimes that's the only way to get it to stop. So, and always trust your instincts. Exploiters and abusers are often, again, they're professionals, so that they can be really charming, and they can be very manipulative to get you to do what they want you to do. So if something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. So always just, get somebody to help you figure that out. And finally, and this is something that happens a lot, and we all need to be aware of it. Never give personal information, including your social security number, bank account numbers, or other financial information to anybody over the phone unless you initiated the call and you trust the other party. We had an instance not too long ago where somebody that I know who has mild cognitive impairment was just about to give their social security number to somebody on the phone when their partner came into the room and took the phone and saw that it wasn't on the up and up and hung up. So these folks are really tricky, and they can sound legit. So just be really aware of not giving out that kind of information. Okay, so here are a few technology tips. Matt, if you want to jump in, please do, because Matt is our technology wizard.
I will at the end.
Okay, good. Make sure your computer's antivirus and security software is up to date. If you receive a suspicious pop-up or a locked screen, disconnect from the internet and turn off the device. Don't open any emails or click on attachments that you don't recognize. Here at work, we have phishing attacks, is I think what they're called, quite a bit, and we always just delete those. And then if something happens and you do get victimized, if somebody hacks your identity or anything like that related to your finances, it's really important to take future precautions to protect your identity and really monitor your accounts vigilantly to look for suspicious activity going forward. Okay, so here are some things that you can do if you suspect that another person is being financially abused. So, and again, this is elder financial abuse. So the first step would be, of course, just to talk to them to see if you notice any of the warning signs that we mentioned, and try to determine exactly and specifically what's happening with their financial situation. And again, as people age, there's a good percentage of people who are experiencing normal aging, which, you know, we all understand that that means just minor forgetfulness. But then there are also a good number of people who are developing cognitive issues, mild cognitive impairment or early dementia. And one of the first abilities that we often see decline in these folks is the ability to properly manage your finances. And of course, this puts them at greater risk. And these are the folks that the fraudsters love to target. So try to get an idea, you know, what's going on, who's helping them with their finances, if anyone is, and just kind of get a feel for maybe if they're losing a step in terms of their ability to adequately manage their finances. So if you think that there is financial abuse going on, you can report it to the person's bank, and that they'll put a hold on the accounts and try to help figure out what's going on usually. You can contact Adult Protective Services, and in a minute, I'll tell you more about how to do that. And then it's important to also, if there is financial abuse, it's important to report it to the police, because again, only about 1 in every 23 of these cases on average is reported. And the more the fraudsters are reported, the more likely it is that the police will be able to find a thread to find people and to prosecute people. And, you know, with elder abuse, including financial abuse, being a felony in Georgia, that means that the penalty can be up to 20 years in prison, a $50,000 fine, or both. That's I think the max limit. So what if it's you? What if it's not another person that you think might be being scammed or abused financially? What if it's you? So first of all, talk to somebody that you trust, a family member or a friend, or maybe to somebody at your place of worship. If you have an attorney, you can talk to your doctor or an officer at your bank. And these folks, just FYI, there's a whole list of people who are mandated reporters, who, if they hear about an alleged incident of some kind of abuse, they are mandated to report that to Adult Protective Services. And you can also contact Adult Protective Services directly yourself, or again, your local police. And again, I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a sec. I wanted to let you know that the state of Georgia in the last decade has started to take crimes against disabled adults and elderly people really, really seriously. So in the last 10 years, this has been a process, but the GBI, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and a unit at the Division of Aging Services called the Forensic Special Initiatives Unit have banded together and launched this task force, the Crimes Against Disabled Adults and Elderly Task Force. And they do things like, of course, investigate and help prosecute cases of abuse, but they also do a lot of training for people, law enforcement, first responders, Adult Protective Services staff, to train them in, you know, looking for the warning signs. So they do a lot of education and training in the community. But Pat King is the manager of the Forensic Special Initiatives Unit. And this is a quote from her: the most frequent kind of abuse that we see is financial exploitation, either by family members or by caregivers. And then, of course, also there's just a ton of those different scams. A different scam almost every month comes into play that's targeting older adults specifically. And, you know, this task force is about all kinds of abuse. So there's abuse, neglect, and exploitation. And the financial exploitation and abuse often leads to a situation that's considered neglect, because the people who are being abused or exploited are then left without money for things that they really need. rent, food, medical care, those kind of things. So often these crimes become more complicated than just financial abuse. So part of this task force involved creating an app. It's the GANE, Georgia Abuse, Neglect, and Exploitation app. And there's two forms of this app. One of them is just for the general public that's got agencies to contact if you suspect some kind of abuse is going on. It's got the laws, directs you straight to the laws. It's got information about placement, reporting missing adults, and then screening. So one version is just for the public. The more robust version is for law enforcement and first responders and adult protective services. So within this app, they've got all the contact information, all the agencies' numbers that they need. They've got resource agencies if they need resources after they find the abuse. They've got, again, all the laws. They've got emergency placement that the different facilities have volunteered to take people who, let's just say, are in an abusive situation and need to be moved from their home, or they've been found wandering and they are not able to figure out where the person's home is. There are some TERF, temporary emergency respite funds, available in those situations. So this app also helps the first responders and APS find those emergency placement facilities that have openings, that have availabilities. And then finally, this is the part that I really wanted to tell you about because it's relevant to our discussion about financial abuse, is that this app has screening tools. And so some professional, law enforcement, adult protective services worker has a tool where they can do a little screen for cognitive impairment. They have a screening tool for, are you being abused or neglected? And they have a tool for financial capacity. And so let's just say a family member has reported that an older adult is being abused financially. And part of the reason is that they don't have the capacity to understand that the abuse is happening. There's a screen on here that helps the first responders, APS, decide whether or not the person is really capable of making sound decisions. You know, in Georgia, they used to say that people have a right to folly. They have a right to make bad financial decisions. But, you know, we realize that that's probably not the best way to approach this problem. We need to figure out if people are really capable of making, you know, decisions that they always would have when they didn't have any impairment. And it might be that even if people do have some cognitive impairment, they understand the implications of what they do, but it might be that their capacity is limited enough so that they're not able to really make good informed decisions for themselves. So this is the once you click on financial capacity, it takes you right into this little screening. And if the screening shows that, yeah, there are probably some issues here with a person's ability to make sound financial decisions, they then go on, they're referred to the appropriate department that uses a longer screening tool. Daniel Marston from the University of Alabama, Birmingham, created with the cooperation of the Alzheimer's Association, a screening tool where people go through, like, actually counting money and, you know, doing checks and answering questions about, you know, in this situation, what would your decision be? So that longer tool can help the law enforcement and APS decide whether or not the person is really capable of, making those decisions. So here are the phone numbers if you believe someone you know is the victim of elder abuse. This is including financial abuse, but any kind of elder abuse. Here's the number for Adult Protective Services, or you can go to the Division of Aging Services website, www.aging.georgia.gov, and click on Report Elder Abuse. You can do it that way. If the person is in an assisted living facility, a personal care home, or nursing facility, the process is a little bit different. It's quicker just to call healthcare facility regulation at this 800 number, and they will take it from there. So those are the ways that you can report. Okay, so that is the conclusion of my PowerPoint. And now we will turn it back over to Matt, and we can open it up for questions.
Yeah, and so if anyone has any questions, please post in the chat. I already saw that a few questions came in. Kind of going back to what Suzette said, I do want to touch on a few technology things. Is that so within
Yes,
the
please.
team, with the besides CP Community Live, I also provide like the tech support, and I kind of do a lot of like technology training. And I get this question a lot about and this is kind of like there's a lot of topics in here. I could probably do a whole talk on passwords as an example, but I do want to give a couple points. And some of these, Suzette, you kind of touched on, but I want to just highlight.
Yeah.
So the first thing it is, I just want to touch on is how a lot of fraudsters and hackers function. And like you mentioned, is that for many of them, it is like a full-time job. And you have to understand that for them, it's often a numbers game where they might have a list of 1,000 people with like their contact information, and they're just going to go down the list, and they're going to try, and they're going to try, and they're going to try. And often they're going to fail. But if they succeed once, then they get paid. So it's important to remember that it's a numbers game, because there have been several times where I've talked to people, and often they have a lot of anxiety about like, oh, do I have to have this super high tech like CIA level password for every single website? And I kind of talk to them, and it's like, well, not necessarily. And it's important to find a balance. And for certain things, like today we're talking about financials. I saw a question come up about online banking. Your online financials is, I like thinking of passwords in tiers, and your online financials are like top tier. So your online like you're getting into your online bank should have a really strong and unique password. I know that everyone likes to kind of have one password that you kind of modify like a little bit, and like for that top tier, for those financials, make them really unique. So it has to be strong, has to be unique, and has to be something that you're going to remember for those tiers. If you have like some website that you're not going to give them any financial information, like you're not going to give them your credit card, you're just signing up to maybe like talk in some sort of like forum or something like that, maybe like having like an easier to remember password is not that big of a deal for something like that. So it's kind of, it's important to find in balance. And but also going back to how it's kind of a numbers game, is that in my opinion is that there's no such thing as a perfect security system. Is that I always compare it to your house, is that often we have locks on the outside of our doors, but if we wanted to, we could put a lock on every single door in your house. And like you want to go to the bathroom, unlock the door. You want to go into the kitchen, unlock the door. That would be more secure, but it would also be like real hassle. And so like it's really important to find like a balance there. And yeah, so I always tell people is like, maybe it's not important to have the highest security, but you definitely don't want to be the lowest security. You don't want to be that house on the street with the doors wide open and a sign saying, "Come, please take my stuff." So that's kind of like the way that I like thinking about these. I recommend thinking about these sorts of things. I mentioned the online banking. Try and make sure that with these financial websites that you have really strong and unique passwords. What else? As far as emails, so like phishing is like a really like popular way of sending, getting like attacked. So one thing that I do like recommending is take for example your bank. If you've been to your bank's website and it's definitely your bank's website, you can save that website as like a bookmark in your browser. And if you get an email from your bank, if there's links in it, 9 times out of 10, and sometimes this will be legitimate, but 9 times out of 10, you don't really need to click a link in the email. You could just go to the link that you know is very secure that you've been to before and log in that way and then get to whatever information that you need to. Or you can give them a call and be like, hey, I got a call saying that, like, I have some fee that I have to pay for my bank. Is this real? You can give them a call. There's kind of like ways of getting around that. A couple other, maybe some tips and tricks that there may not be as obvious. One thing that I really like is, obviously for some website, some things on the internet, having your real identity is important. Like your banking information, you probably want to have your real, like the bank's going to require that. But, it's not illegal to like give false information. So if you're like on a website and it asks for your name, and if it's not critical, like it could just be something really small. It's like let's say you have some sort of hobby, really into basketball, and there's a basketball website that you need to have a login for. Well, one way of protecting your identity is like, do you really need to know my real name? Can I just make up a fake name? Can I make up like something like that? That is like kind of like one way of like making sure that your personal identity information doesn't just get everywhere on the internet. That's one tip that I think it's like obvious, but like not everyone always thinks of. What else? Those are kind of like my quick tips. Let's take a look at the questions and see what people have been posting. So I know one question that got posted a lot earlier, Suzette, is do you have any recommendations for an elder law attorney or how to find one?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are a lot of them in the state of Georgia and in Metro Atlanta in particular. And what you want to look for is somebody who belongs to NALA, the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. And also, if you know other people who use elder law attorneys, ask for recommendations. There are a few of them who have big staffs. Like they have social workers and all kind of folks on their team. They some of them do home visits, and some of them have specialties like Medicaid requirements. So I think it's worth, if you're going on NALA on the website, National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys, looking for somebody in your area, and then doing just a little bit of research about what perhaps they specialize in, how big their firm is. And if you can get an idea, you can call them and just ask them about rates. And they're not going to want to give you a whole bunch of specifics, but some of the firms will want to do like a big bucket of services for you, like wills, advanced directives, all in one. And they charge you a pretty hefty fee like that. For that. And then some of them are more a la carte, where if you just want to go in and, do a will or a power of attorney, that you can do that. So I think, a NALA certified person and questions. Those are my tips.
Okay. Also, do you know what the healthcare facility phone, you were talking about group housing for health R facility regulation. What was that phone number?
Let's see here. It is 800-878-6442. That's healthcare facility regulation. And that's for if you suspect, abuse or exploitation of somebody who's living in a facility.
Cool. We also had some questions about robocalls. And so unfortunately, until we change some laws, it's gonna be something that we live with. So first tip on getting rid of robocalls, talk to your local politician, whoever your local representative is, and tell them that you're unhappy about that, because there was a lot of laws that applied to robocalls for landlines, but they didn't apply to not all laws applied to cell phone numbers. And that's why like robocalls were like really big like years ago, and then they kind of died down, and then they kind of came back like full swing more recently. It's because like cell phone laws, like cell phones are not always covered by the same laws. So that's the first thing. I just want to give a pitch for that. Second thing is, so what to do about it practically. So there are some do not call lists. They are not super effective. So they usually help. I usually recommend, if it, I think that there are some for the state of Georgia that you like get on. Also, if you do get any calls, if you ask them to put you on a do not call list, if they are a legitimate company, I mean, obviously if it's a criminal, they're not going to listen to this, but if it is just a legitimate company like calling people, then that will help. There are some apps that you can install on your phone. I think that if you have an Android phone, I think those apps work a little bit better, is because Apple doesn't give like full control to phone calls the way that you get an Android phone. So there are some like spam blocking apps for Android that do an okay job, or even if they don't block it, you might get a little thing in the name where it's like possible scam, which can be helpful. One other more extreme step that I've definitely worked with a few people on now is this. I know this definitely works on iPhones. I think some Android phones have a similar function, which is on an iPhone, you can set a setting where if the phone number is not in the person's contacts, the phone will not ring. You'll still, like, if you open up your phone, you'll see that you had a missed call, but you just never would have heard it ring. That can be like a really great step for some people. And I've talked to some people who have found it really effective, because oftentimes I think that if people, if their symptoms have progressed to the point where they are at a high risk for giving their personal financial information over the phone, oftentimes they're not making a ton of phone calls, or maybe not, or maybe the phone calls that they're making are always to, like, the same family and friends and maybe doctors, like, over and over again. So in that case, is like, as long as you make sure that like all of their family and friends in the offices, like their doctor's office and stuff like that, are all in their contacts, turning on a setting like that might be fine. But I always like warn people, it's kind of like an extreme step. And especially for, maybe if you're still working and, you take a lot of business calls. Like, I know I get a lot of phone calls from like people in the study, like asking for help. And like, so it would be really bad for me to turn that setting on, because I get a lot of phone calls from people in the study or staff and all kinds of other people at Emory. And so that would be problematic for me. But, it's really, you have to really take that on a case by case basis. And I've heard a lot of success with that, but like I said, it's a decision you really got to think through. And because and I didn't touch on this, because the real problem with this is it's almost like a safety problem, because if there was ever a time where, let's say, your battery died and you really needed to call that person, if that setting's on, that phone is just not going to ring, and you'll never get a hold of them. You'll have to call a friend or family to then make another call. So anyway, so like it could be problematic, but anyways, that's like a really extreme example that can really help with that. But for everyone else, unfortunately, it's not a great example. There's not a lot of great solutions that are like bulletproof. One other general tip that I wanted to mention, and I kind of like alluded to this too, but I want to put a finer point on, was also a good way of making it so you're not attacked is also trying to, in a smart way, reduce the amount of your information that's like out on the internet. Now, again, in balance, this doesn't mean going crazy and trying to scrub the internet of every mention of you in every case, because that's going to be difficult. But what I mean is, especially with financial information. So the example that I like saying is that I really suggest that people use PayPal or some sort of other payment processing app that you'll often see in like the checkout when you're buying something online, because what those services can do is they can reduce the amount of your credit card information that's being saved out on the internet. So like, take for example, let's say you go to panerabread.com and you order like some food on there. If you give them your credit card information, well, now your credit card and your financial information lives on that website. And then let's say you go to some store and you're buying like a toy for a nephew of yours. Well, and if you give them your credit card, now your credit card information lives on two websites, and so on and so on and so on. But if you use a service like PayPal, or there's a lot of other things like Braintree and another, Amazon does it. A lot of like larger companies are now starting to do this. You'll see it says like pay with Amazon or pay with Apple or pay with Google or pay with PayPal. Just choose one of those. And if you can try and stick to one, it kind of reduces the amount of your information that gets saved in all these other places. Because what happens is, the more places that you're on is that you have a higher chance of one of those websites getting hacked and then your information getting stolen. So that's like another kind of tip that I have of just trying to, in a smart way, trying to limit the amount of your personal information, especially financial information, that gets out there onto the multiple different websites. Okay, coming back and checking some questions. Someone also brought up a good point, is that some people don't like answering anonymous calls or unknown calls, and that if it's important, they'll just leave them a message. That's a really good tip. Kind of just screen your calls like that.
Yep.
Yeah, with someone also brought up that with landlines, you do get some other options. There are some services like through your phone company that can kind of screen your calls. But for just, I don't know, society has I think it has a problem with like adopting new technology. Sometimes it's like we kind of like made some things with landlines, but for whatever reason, we just didn't do it with cell phones. So yeah, so there are some tricks that work with landlines, but they don't always work with cell phones. And someone also just brought up, using separate passwords for each account. And just really quick on passwords is that, yeah, like, having having longer passwords than shorter passwords are good. So as an example, one thing that I like to, an example I like to use is the password, my favorite car color is red. It's like a sentence. That's a really long password. That password is like very difficult to break, and it's kind of easy to remember, but it's difficult to figure out what it is. That's better than a capital X exclamation point 4P, something that's like really short, that's like super complicated. That longer password is often better. And yeah, just trying to like have not to reuse the same passwords, but like I said, in moderation. If you feel like you're really struggling with like remembering a different password for everything, like I said, think about your passwords in tiers. Top tier, financial information, things like really important bills like your heating, electric, and try and make sure that those have like really good secure passwords. Make sure to write those down. But if you, like I said, if you're on a basketball website, and maybe it's okay to reuse a password every now and again, as long as there's nothing critical or something that could be used against you on there. Yeah, someone's also mentioning like other PayPal competitors. I don't own stock in any of these companies, so I just like PayPal because PayPal is on. You see that a lot on most websites. There are things like Zelle and Wells Fargo, and I know Apple does it, Google does it, Amazon does it, Visa does it, Braintree. There's a lot of them. I think all of them are pretty secure. It's kind of like your own preference. Like if you have a lot of your banking information with one bank, maybe it's worth trying to go through that. Like I said, I like PayPal because it's on most websites. So someone mentioned that like what happens when you give them your credit card information over the phone, like at a restaurant. My guess is the restaurant's probably not saving that information, and like I said, it's okay. Like we're never gonna have a perfect system, but it's all about like kind of reducing like the number. So if you love that restaurant and you give your information over the phone, if you've been going there a while and you trust that restaurant, that's probably okay. But It's just trying to, if you could just reduce the amount of times you give out your credit card information by 30%, like that's great. It doesn't have to be super perfect. Yeah, someone just also mentioned that there's a lot of calls out there trying to save us money on mortgages and all kinds of things. Extended warranties is another really common trope.
Yep.
So yeah, just want to thank everyone for the positive remarks. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to answer them. I know I didn't really dive too deep into like passwords and stuff. I could probably maybe I should do a whole talk on passwords. I get that question a lot in the study. And so maybe you guys can look forward to that in a future week coming up.
I like that idea, Matt.
Yeah. Well, we're our overtime. I want to thank everyone for coming. I'm going to leave this link open just for a few more minutes if everyone has any questions. But if no one has any other questions, then feel free to leave and we'll see you guys next week. I want to thank everyone for coming. I thank you guys all for the great questions and feedback. And yeah, so we'll see you guys next week, same time. Bye, guys.